New York.
Apple.
Hot dogs.
Dollar.
Hollywood.
Democracy.
Freedom. Rock and roll.
Wall Street.
Statue of Liberty.
Los Angeles, California.
McDonald's. Jeans.
Bubblegum. Video games. Nintendo.
What's so great about America?
Every Saturday night, 7 to 9 p.m., explore American culture and language.
With Master Steve,
Ina MK,
And Hasba Cutie.
tune in to find out about what makes America so great.
The Great American Weekend. Listen exclusively on Radio Van 103.1.
Also, watch us on the Radio Van Facebook page, website, and mobile app.
Good evening, dear ladies and gentlemen, listeners of Radio Van 103.1.
This is the
Great
American
Weekend. And I'm here in the studio with Master Steve.
And Master Steve is here with Ina MK.
Thank you for your introduction. How have you been, Master Steve?
I've been all right. How have you been, Ina?
I've been great, and today we have a very specialized, special issue.
Yeah,
Talking about,
I made a mistake when we were researching for today's
not a
show.
mistake.
No, wait, honestly, it was. There's a website, and I'm going to talk about this because
Yeah, okay.
I made a mistake, and I need to take responsibility for it. Or as we say these days in America, I need to own it. Right?
Own it.
I need to own it. Whatever. I was just looking at the news, and maybe we'll talk about this article later, but Elizabeth Warren, she owns her anger.
She
Anyway,
does.
yeah, maybe we'll talk about that later.
Not the best thing to own.
Well, it's better to own it than to not own it and let it kind of take over and control things.
And create mess.
Exactly. So I'm going to own my mistake here. The website that I usually look at, or one of the two that I usually look at to find out what's going on in terms of national days and month celebrations and all that kind of stuff, told me that November 1st was Family Literacy Day. Actually, two of them did. And one of them also said that November is National Literacy Month. And while I can't find any other evidence for November being National Literacy Month, but we'd already gotten kind of a ways into this planning before I realized that. I don't know where that came from. Now, the thing with National Family Literacy Day is that once Congress passed a resolution back in 1994, I think it was, saying that November 1st was National Family Literacy Day. And the idea behind this day...
I also read, actually.
Yeah, but
online.
Only once. It's not like a yearly thing, apparently.
Okay,
so it's not a recurring celebration. You know, a lot of the things that we've been talking about as like national days or national months.
So we dedicate our show to this one case.
Well, okay, yeah. Time warp. We're going back to 1994. I wish we could kind of go back to 1994 because look at all these books I have around me. So we're going to be doing literature and literacy on the show today. And one of the things that maybe we should talk about is media literacy. Internet literacy and learning how to do proper research on the internet, which is one of the things that I teach. So that's why it's really embarrassing to have made this mistake. But anyway, no, so
you did it on purpose
we've got all sorts of
show it as an example.
Kind of. No, I didn't do it on purpose, but so I've got all these books. We're going to be reading some poetry and some stuff from some novels and maybe a little bit from a short story by American authors.
And I know that we've got some birthdays to mention, but
yeah,
some famous.
Well, okay. I mean, part of the reason why I thought of American authors with all of this is back October 30th was Ezra Pound's birthday, and he's one of the great American poets from the 20th century. And then the end of this month is Mark Twain's birthday. Yeah. And actually, we're going to try to dedicate almost all of the last show of this month to Mark Twain.
And I've got another birthday to mention.
Yeah?
Today is Shushanik's birthday.
Well, now that's an important one.
So before we get to our theme, we would like, the Great American Weekend would like to congratulate our founder and director, Shushanik Arefshatian. Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
All the best American and Armenian wishes to you. Stay healthy, as positive as you are, and full of different exciting ideas. Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, happy birthday, Shushani.
Yeah.
That's
happy
wonderful.
Birthday.
So, and actually, well, see, and I've got another thing too, now that you mentioned it.
Mm-hmm.
This writer.
The mystery.
But yeah, Jim Studer, who was my high school English teacher. It's his birthday today.
Oh, happy birthday.
And so, happy birthday to Mr. Studer. And I might read a little bit from one of his short stories from a book of short stories that he just had published recently called The Mystery of Tony the Goat and Other Tales.
Tony the Goat?
Yeah. It's just, this is just some great local color. And when I say local color, it's set in central Minnesota, where he grew up, where I went to college.
Is it
Those
some
sorts of-
humorous?
Yeah,
stuff?
there's some funny stuff. They're good short stories. I really enjoyed reading them. So yeah,
Cool.
Happy birthday to Mr. Studer.
Happy birthday, Mr. Studer.
And if you
from
want to know what life
Yerevan.
was like growing up in central Minnesota in, the mid 20th century, this is a neat little book of stories. The Mystery of Tony the Goat and Other Tales.
Great. Thank you for this introduction, Mr. Steve. And I would like to remind our listeners that you guys can join our show by calling 560-901. Call in, ask your questions, participate, chit-chat, and just practice your English.
Call in.
Call in.
And, call in and share with us your favorite pieces of American literature.
560-901. Don't be shy. We're here to support and help you. And if you want to watch us live, you can go to www.radiovan.fm, our Facebook page, Radio Van FM 103.1, and of course the application. Download it and listen and watch anywhere around the globe. Now we're gonna have a little break, after which we will come back with some quotes, I guess.
Ina's got her quotes about literature and reading. I like these.
Literature, books, reading. It's all
reading.
about Master Steve tonight.
It's all about my books.
Yeah. Do not hesitate. Join us, call in, write your comments. We are here till 9 p.m. The Great American Weekend.
So then I tell the bartender, no, you keep the change.
Guys, I don't get it.
Ina, it's an American thing.
Learn more about American humor on Great American Weekend.
And we're back in the studio with Master Steve. This is the Great American Weekend with books and literacy and literature episode. All about books, all about knowledge, all about
reading.
Smartness. All about reading, and we're ready to read the quotes of this week and of the theme. So let's start. Let's do this. And before...
Oh, the first quote is from Mark Twain,
Yeah.
whose birthday is at the end of the month.
Which you mentioned earlier at the beginning of our show. So let's start. The man who does not read has no advantage over the man who cannot read at all.
I love that.
Mark Twain, yeah.
It doesn't matter if you know how to read.
Should use
Because if you
it.
don't bother to.
It doesn't matter if you have a brain. If you don't use it,
Yeah.
it's kind of the same. Once you learn to read, you will be forever free. Frederick Douglass.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, agree on that one. People don't realize how a man's whole life can be changed by one book.
Ooh, which one? I want to ask you a question then. what might be the most life-changing book you ever read?
You know, I can mention two of them, and they are significant for two periods in my life. One of them is The Little Prince, which is one of my favorite books. I actually have read it several times, and I reread this book every now and then. It's not only a fairy tale, of course, but it has a whole philosophy in there.
It's one of those little kids books.
Yeah,
one of those children's books that means something
bigger
to you, different. It means something different to you at almost at every stage of life you're in. You know, I think Winnie the Pooh, Alice in Wonderland are the same, at least for me.
True.
Those are the ones that, as I've read them to my kids at different stages in my life, I've seen different things in them.
So number one would be The Little Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. And the second one, which I really, really loved, and I read it during my school years, like last school years, is, and then I reread it, is The Three Friends, or Three Comrades, by, forgot. Remarque. Eric Maria Remarque.
Yeah, Remarque, yeah.
So that's my second. It was life-changing because it gave me a lot of emotional base. So if I can put it in this way.
Yeah.
Which later on during life was helping me in different situations. So
that's really cool.
Those are the two books I would mention.
Neat.
And what about you?
Me.
Oh, you didn't expect
No,
that
I didn't. You know, well, one would have to be, and actually I think both, well, one would be a play. Mm-hmm. Samuel Beckett's Waiting for Godot. Mm-hmm. One of my favorite pieces of literature. I read it for the first time when I was in high school and just did not get it. But I was so intrigued by it that I kept going back to it.
Yeah.
And then at some point, all of a sudden, it just became, oh my gosh, this is
what he meant.
Incredible.
Yeah.
And I taught it for a while when I was teaching high school literature. Another one, which is kind of the same way, I read it as a freshman in college, Albert Camus' The Plague. And that was, I mean, I knew there was something there as well. And I probably liked it more than I liked Waiting for Godot when I first read it. But it took me a few times of reading it before I realized what I thought it really meant and what I thought Camus was really trying to say and how it fit in. And actually, I find similarities between The Plague and Waiting for Godot. Yeah. And then I guess part of what helped all of that kind of fit together is an essay by Martin Heidegger, which I think I've mentioned before here, The Origin of the Work of Art, which is just incredible.
Actually, I think this is what a real good book is all about, to give each person who reads it something that they can find for themselves.
Yeah.
That they can understand in each stage of their life. So each period that they're going through.
Yeah, I think any book or any piece of literature or any piece of art that is worth being called a classic is it has a multitude of meanings. It has different layers of meaning. You can't exhaust it. You can't read it and say, I'm done with it.
Done with it.
I know what that means. No, because then a few years later, you'll come back and you'll read it again and be like, oh man, there's stuff that I missed. They have a complexity. They have some self-contradiction in them. They have, I mean, they're like life, you know, and so you're never done with them. A book
that
or a
has
poem,
something to say always.
And ones that you find really that have something personal to say to you a lot of times will have something new to say to you.
And it's never old.
Every time
it
you
never
read
gets
it.
old.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we're ready for another quote, and we'll be going for a break because we have an advertisement break, or Maybe.
advertisement and
a song.
And a song. Well, yeah, so let's do the break. We'll come back after the break, too, and do some more quotes. Because I think, I don't know, I find this incredibly interesting.
He's right, as always.
if our audience, doesn't want to hear any more about this, then, call us and tell us to stop.
Yeah,
but if you don't call us and tell us to stop, we're just going to keep riding this wave. We're going to have the quotes and talking about books. And
you guys feel free to call in 560901. We're here till 9 p.m. We would like to chit-chat with you and hear your opinion about our show, about stuff in general, about books, literature. And this is the Great American Weekend. We'll be back after the advertisement break and a song, Coco by Parov Stellar. Stay tuned.
Hey, what kind of fixins do you like on your hot dog?
Fixins?
Yeah, relish, onions, mustard, ketchup, condiments.
No, not that.
Oh, fixins. I love chili dogs.
Learn about American cuisine on the Great American Weekend.
Welcome back to the Great American Weekend here on Radio Vaughn. I am Master Steve, and I'm here with Ina MK.
Hey, we continue with our quotes, and let's read the third one in the row. Literacy is a bridge from mystery to hope. It is a tool for daily life in modern society. It is a bulwark against poverty and a building block of development, an essential complement to investments in roads, dams, clinics, and factories. Literacy is a platform for democratization and a vehicle for the promotion of cultural and national identity, especially for girls and women. It is an agent of family health and nutrition for everyone, everywhere. Literacy is, along with education in general, a basic human right. Literacy is finally the road to human progress and the means through which every man, woman, and child can realize his or her full potential. Kofi Annan.
I like the way that he compares it to
nutrition.
Building roads, dams, clinics, and factories.
Mm-hmm.
But then I want to go back to the Mark Twain quote. The man who doesn't read has no advantage over the man who can't. So, yeah, you need to read, and you need to try to read things that challenge you, Read
stuff that you need to understand.
Yeah. Stuff that, there was a, I forget where I read it now, but it's been years, and I know Samuel Beckett had mentioned this at one point in one of his writings that I read, that as it tends to be that as more people learn to read, as the literacy rate goes up,
mm-hmm.
the reading ability of the average person who's literate actually goes down.
Why?
So that as more people learn to read, what's considered an average reading level
mm-hmm.
is lower, meaning that people can't read things that are as complex or difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's kind of sad too.
Yeah. It is.
I mean, how many people read poetry anymore? How many people read books? I mean, you read stuff on your phone most of the time now.
Yeah, that's true.
And
I love the feeling of the pages.
So do I. And I found, talking about family literacy, right? I find that my kids, when my kids were little, and Emmy's still little, but, if I'm reading on a Kindle or reading on my phone, they
mm-hmm.
look at you and they think, oh, what are they doing? They could be doing anything,
Yeah, it doesn't look like
you're reading.
Mm-hmm.
If you're sitting there with a book, they know what you're doing. And I think that,
also
leaves
like
leaves a deeper impression than you're just sitting there on your phone, because you could be on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram, and there is so you
need to announce I'm reading a book.
Kids, yeah.
Attention.
I have a Kindle, and I used to use it a lot until like Onyx showed up and I could order books and have them brought from the US, reasonably priced. Still expensive, but whatever. I always wanted a Kindle that had a screen on the back that would display the cover of whatever it was I was reading.
Because
that's one of those things. You see somebody reading, like in public or on the bus or on the subway,
and it motivates you.
And you want to look and see what it is that they're reading and take a look. Oh, what is
because
that?
Good things are contagious at the end of the day. All that mankind has done, thought, gained, or been, it is lying as in magic preservation in the pages of books. Thomas Carlyle.
Nice.
Whenever you read a good book somewhere in the world, a door opens to allow in more light. Vera Nazarian. To encourage literature and the arts is a duty which every good citizen owes to his country. George Washington.
I love that. I love that because it's about culture. I mean, a country needs to have a culture in order to
have a face.
To have a face, to have a community. Yeah. Literature, art, it's necessary. It's not frivolous.
Yeah. Want to fix it all? Save the world? Change the system? Ensure progress? Get books into the hands of kids and your work will be done. Peter van der Walt.
Good books. Good
books. And actually, it's what you were mentioning a few minutes ago.
Yeah.
No one is truly literate who cannot read his own heart. And that's a figurative phrase by Eric Hoffer.
Yeah. But
it's also reading. Why
not? It is. Well, and we use the word literacy for all sorts of things now. Like I was saying earlier in the show, media literacy, technology literacy. You're not reading technology.
Psychology.
It's understanding literacy. Psychology. Last month was in the U.S. It was National Health Literacy. So being able to read about, understand health issues and stuff.
But sometimes here in Armenia, everybody appears to be doctors. So we need to we need to understand
here in Armenia. Sometimes everybody
line.
Appears to be everything.
Yeah, politicians.
You don't have to go
doctors,
very far to find somebody who will
presidents.
claim to be an expert.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is endearing and cute most of the time, and then sometimes it gets to be just let me do what I want to do.
There's a really delicate line between literacy and being the expert of everything. So be cautious. Be careful, guys. There are many little ways to enlarge your child's world. Love of books, good books, is the best of all. Jacqueline Kennedy.
Yeah, definitely.
When you learn to read, you will be born again, and you will never be quite so alone again. Rumer Godden.
Cool.
So it is with children who learn to read fluently and well. They begin to take flight into the whole new world as effortlessly as young birds take to the sky. William James. To learn to read is to light a fire. Every syllable that is spelled out is a spark. Victor Hugo.
Mm-hmm.
And the last one. No, not the last one. I've got two more. Fairy tales in childhood are stepping stones throughout life, leading the way through trouble and trial. The value of fairy tales lies not in the brief literary escape from reality, but in the gift of hope that goodness truly is more powerful than evil, and that even the darkness reality can lead to a happily ever after. Do not take that gift of hope lightly. It has the power to conquer despair in the midst of sorrow, to light the darkness in the valleys of life, to whisper one more time in the face of failure. Hope is what gives life to dreams, making the fairy tale a reality. L.R. Nost. That's a really good point. And again, there is a line, a border between understanding the reality and staying in the world of fairy tales and dreams.
Yeah.
And going away from.
Yeah, well, and that that's one of the criticisms that people often have of art and literature, especially literature, that it's merely escapism.
Yeah.
Meaning you're reading a book to escape the real world and to go off into some imaginary place. Well, it can be, but
also
the best of it isn't.
Escaping from reality can be anything. I mean, playing games.
Facebook,
yeah, social
media,
and lots of other movies can also be a way
and that's
to escape from
but it
reality.
all depends on how you're thinking about what you're reading and how you bring those lessons back to your everyday life. I mean, hope, and I have no idea who L.R. Nost is, but it sounds like he's talking about kind of older literature. Newer literature has, we're going to talk about literary terms and stuff later on. And instead of slang, we're going to be doing literary terms and stuff.
And it's cool. Educative.
And that's, you used to have the protagonist and who was the hero, right?
Yeah.
And the main character of novels and stories used to usually be somebody that you would look up to, that you would aspire to be like.
True.
Modern literature and postmodern literature, say for the last 100 years or so, 150 years, there's been a lot of what you would call anti-heroes. I mean, the main character is not someone that you would aspire to be like. Not that they're a villain necessarily, but they're not not necessarily an admirable person. Yeah. And
not a criteria to
not somebody to idolize.
Yeah.
But there are different ways of talking about that, and there are different reasons that different authors, different writers would do that. But if if you're reading one of those stories, then you have to kind of think, well, is it telling me about hope, or is it telling me about
what not to do in life?
What not to do. Yeah. Like I said, the two books that I talked about are not incredibly hopeful books. Waiting for Godot and The Plague. They're not really hopeful books. But there's a lot there.
But there's a light at the end of the tunnel, maybe.
No, at the end of the tunnel, you go back into the tunnel.
Okay.
In both of them. Ouch. So maybe it's time for a poem?
Yeah. Actually, I'd love to do that. Would you like to start?
Yeah, I'll start with one. And this is, okay, I'm going to start with Ezra Pound. And Ezra Pound was part of the Lost Generation. He was born and grew up in the U.S. He was one of those people that ran off, in between the First and the Second World War to... And
what is the Lost Generation?
Well, the Lost Generation, it's this group of... it's the generation that kind of was of age after the First World War. Mm-hmm. Okay, and there was a lot of kind of survivor guilt or survival anxiety. There was a lot of depression and just hopelessness with them, because look at what had just happened. The world had thought that Europe was this bastion of, starting to be democracies, being peaceful, being an example for the rest of the world, and we're going to make things better, and we're going to progress forward, and things are going to be great. And then all of a sudden we have the First World War, and it's, one of the bloodiest conflicts in the history of humanity. And we have created these machines like machine guns and tanks that can kill people more efficiently than ever before. And so it was just this, what? And a lot of great writing happened in that period between the First World War and the Second World War. Ezra Pound, T.S. Eliot, Hemingway, E. Cummings, and a lot of them had experience in Europe, and a lot of them were in Europe after the war as well. And the people that are talked about as the lost generation typically are the ones that lived in England and in Paris.
And Eric Maria Remarque, whom I mentioned before, he's also the lost generation.
Yeah, considered part of that. Yeah,
and he wrote about that in his book.
Yeah, and then then from the same time period, there's J.D. Salinger, who wasn't really, I don't think he's really considered part of the lost generation, but he's from that time period. So Ezra Pound, he ends up in England and then ends up in Italy, and this is funny. He's a little crazy. Very eccentric in his tastes and his views. He ends up in Italy during the Second World War and is doing pro-fascist radio broadcasts in Italy.
Pro-fascist?
Yeah, even after the Americans declare war on Italy and Nazi Germany, fascist Italy and Nazi Germany. He's captured when the Americans liberate Italy, and they were going to try him for treason, and he could have been put to death. But they end up finding him incapable or unable to stand trial, unable to be put on trial because he's mentally ill. And so he spends time in a mental institution instead of...
Did that help?
I don't know. He ended up working on his cantos, which are the long poems that he wrote towards the end of his life, and they're nuts. They are so complex and just wow. I can't even. I mean, I enjoy reading parts of them, but I don't understand
the whole thing.
I don't. Yeah. Oh no, I haven't read the whole thing. I mean, it's a huge book, and it shifts between languages, and it's nuts.
It's complex.
Yeah. So anyway, but
we're ready.
Okay.
1, 2, 3.
Here's a poem of his called A Pact, and it makes reference to Walt Whitman, right, who was kind of the first great American poet. And he's famous for being one of the first world-renowned poets to write in free verse and blank verse, which is without meter and without rhyme. Okay. So, A Pact. I make a pact with you, Walt Whitman. I have detested you long enough. I come to you as a grown child who has had a pig-headed father. I am old enough now to make friends. It was you that broke the new wood. Now it is time for carving. We have one sap and one root. Let there be commerce between us.
Wow. Thank you. Analyzing?
No. Well, do you want to? I don't know. I mean, it's just, it just seems funny to me that he would refer to Walt Whitman as a pig-headed father.
Yeah, that's...
because Whitman was, free verse and blank verse. I mean, he was writing poetry without meter, without rhyme. And so what kind of constraints does that give? I don't know. But Pound and Eliot, who was good friends with him, I'm going to read some T.S. Eliot later, they broke all the rules. Yeah. So compared to them, Walt Whitman is kind of conservative. But compared to whatever came before Whitman, Whitman was breaking all the rules. So it's interesting how generations look at each other as being so these constraining.
People breaking the rules became classic at the end of the day.
Oh yeah. Yeah, well, it was part of their aesthetic. It was part of the way that they went about things. But we have to think. I mean, that's true too. I mean, even somebody as classic as Shakespeare did stuff at the time that was revolutionary, and that's why we remember him.
And wasn't accepted.
Yeah, that's why we don't. I mean, that's why there are so many other people that were writing at the same time as all of these guys who are forgotten. Because they were doing what was normal. And these guys who become famous, who become kind of literary heroes, the masters, were doing something different. They innovated somehow.
It's always cool to do something different.
It's just a matter of how different.
I would like to talk about the Pulitzer Prize a little bit.
Okay.
I mean, just to mention for information for people who do not know what it is. So the Pulitzer Prize is an award for achievements in newspaper, magazine, and online journalism, literature, and musical composition in the United States. It was established in 1917 by provisions in the will of American-Hungarian-born Joseph Pulitzer, who had made his fortune as a newspaper publisher, and is administered by Columbia University in New York City. He gave money in his will to Columbia University to launch a journalism school and establish the prize. It allocated $250,000 to the prize and scholarships. He specified 4 awards in journalism, 4 in letters and drama, 1 in education, and 4 traveling scholarships. After his death on October 29th, 1911, the first Pulitzer Prizes were awarded June 4th in 1917. They are now announced each April.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is kind of the American equivalent to the Nobel Prizes.
Yeah.
You know, you've got the Nobel Prize for Literature. And actually, it's not the Nobel Prize for Literature. And that's funny because it says for letters and drama. Mm-hmm. Letters is actually what the
text.
Letters is what the Nobel Prize for Literature is. It's letters. And so letters would include literature, and in the past, too, it would also include philosophy as well. Although, you know, nobody really wins these prizes for philosophy. I think there's one writer who won the Nobel Prize for Literature for philosophy. And then, well, there was Winston Churchill who won it for his kind of histories. Let's see. Ooh, T.S. Eliot. And what's funny about both Ezra Pound and T.S. Eliot ended up spending a lot of time outside the United States. So sometimes Eliot is considered British literature instead of American literature.
Don't the British and Americans have the debate on this?
I don't know. And here is, so T.S. Eliot started out, he met Ezra Pound when he moved to England. And Ezra Pound really helped him out getting his feet on the ground and publishing and stuff. And he started out as pretty avant-garde, challenging things. His poem, anyway. And then he goes back later on in life and becomes far more traditional, going back to meter and rhyme. And in fact, even becomes a British citizen. And there's some sort of like going back to...
Britain changed him.
Yeah.
Took away his freedom from him.
No.
I'm just joking. Yeah. Go for it.
Eyes that last I saw in tears. Eyes that last I saw in tears, through division, here in death's dream kingdom. The golden vision reappears. I see the eyes, but not the tears. This is my affliction. This is my affliction. Eyes I shall not see again. Eyes of decision. Eyes I shall not see unless at the door of death's other kingdom, where, as in this, the eyes outlast a little while outlast the tears, and hold us in derision.
Wow, that is philosophical.
Don't ask me to explain it, but it's beautiful.
Thank you, and I'm going to give applause to you right now.
This is the Great American Weekend.
This is the Great American Weekend, and we are going on a break. We have an advertisement break, and right after that, we're going to listen to Marvin and Miles, Gare du Nord. And then we'll come back with some more poetry, literature, books, quotes, quizzes, and a calendar of events.
Some news and calendar of events, yeah.
So stay tuned. This is the Great American Weekend. Call in 560-901. Do not hesitate. We're here to chat with you till 9 p.m.
What's the best word in American English?
My all-time favorite word is but I usually refer to it as lovemaking.
Become more fluent in American English and slang.
Welcome back to the Great American Weekend here on Radio Vaughn.
And I'm ready to hear to read the poem that I chose for this episode. And
You can
then-
read more than one if you want. You make it sound like I'm only going to let you do one. The poem I chose.
So it's called I Carry Your Heart. I carry it in my heart. Where is it?
Oh, no.
And before I find it, let's... Okay.
Should I do it?
Ready?
Yep.
I'm going to turn down the background music a little bit. I carry your heart with me. I carry it in my heart. I'm never without it. Anywhere I go, you go, my dear. And whatever is done by only me is your doing, my darling. I fear no fate, for you are my fate, my sweet. I want no world, for beautiful you are, my world, my true. And it's you are whatever a moon has always meant, and whatever a sun will always sing is you. Here is the deepest secret nobody knows. Here is the root of the root, and the bud of the bud, and the sky of a tree called life, which grows higher than soul can hope or mind can hide. And this is the wonder that's keeping the stars apart. I carry your heart. I carry it in my heart. Thank you. I was practicing. Actually.
E.E. Cummings is one of those. He's so odd. So incredibly odd. And you can't tell from the way that you read a poem of his out loud how it's supposed to look on paper.
Yeah,
right? Because
Right.
just does all sorts of weird things.
And he creates his own terms and he creates his own words.
Mm-hmm.
I actually read a little bit about him before practicing the poem.
He was in the U.S. Army during World War I, stationed in Europe, and he was writing letters back home to his family or his friends. And he was writing them the way that he writes, with all of this weird stuff in it.
It
right?
was a puzzle.
And
puzzle
they
letters.
actually, because they were screening the letters that the soldiers were sending out to make sure that they weren't giving up any sensitive information, to make sure that they weren't actually spies and all this kind of stuff. And they apparently brought him in to be interviewed because they suspected him of being a spy who was writing in some sort of a code.
Of information.
Yeah, to send information back because his letters were just so strange.
That's funny.
So I've got, I've got an E.E. Cummings poem, and I hadn't seen him around for a while. But I've seen him in the last couple of weeks, so I thought of this poem. But there's this guy who walks around in downtown Yerevan with his sharpening wheel, and he goes around and he sharpens people's knives. Have you seen this guy? Yeah. I think it's the same guy that used to come around years ago.
And there isn't only one guy. I think there. And years ago,
well, there are a few.
We had like a person who would come to different buildings and just yell, I will sharpen a knife and scissors.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think the same guy that I've seen around lately is the same guy that I used to see around a few years ago, but I hadn't seen him for a while. I don't know where he went or whatever. But here's an E.E. Cummings poem that, seeing him reminded me of that, of this poem.
Do it.
Who sharpens every dull. Here comes the only man, reminding with his bell to disappear a son. And out of houses poor, maids, mothers, widows, wives, bringing this visitor their very oldest lives. One pays him with a smile, another with a tear. Some cannot pay at all. He never seems to care. He sharpens, is to am. He sharpens, say, to sing. You'd almost cut your thumb, so right he sharpens wrong. And when their lives are keen, he throws the world a kiss and slings his wheel upon his back, and off he goes. But we can hear him still, if now our sun is gone, reminding with his bell to reappear a moon.
Oh, that was good. Thank you. That did sound like a poem dedicated to this guy.
Yeah, well, but I mean, literally, the person in the poem is going around, is sharpening lives, which rhymes with knives. But it's he's. I don't exactly what he's doing. I'm not sure, but it sounds like it's a guy going around sharpening knives. But as he's doing that, he's talking with people and acting as sort of a therapist or a psychologist.
Edward the Scissorhands. You remember that movie?
Yeah.
Okay, are we ready for the news or
no,
we're not.
Is there anything happening in the world that's more important than literature? I don't know.
Never.
If you want to go, do you want to?
Well, I can share some local news and we'll
do it.
Go back
do
to
it.
our poetry and literature. So Armenia is among the top 3 countries from 65 assessed states to have recorded the biggest progress in 2019 in internet freedom. Attention. According to Freedom House, Armenia is ranked as free in the Freedom on the Net 2019 report. Armenia and France are both ranked 8th with 76 points. In 2018, Armenia was 13th. In Armenia, positive changes unleashed by the 2018 Velvet Revolution continued, with reformist Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan presiding over a reduction in restriction on content and violations of users' rights. In particular, violence against online journalists declined, and the digital news media enjoyed greater freedom from economic and political pressures, Freedom House said. With this ranking, Armenia is the regional leader. Azerbaijan is again ranked not free and placed 45th. Georgia has maintained last year's ranking and is 10th. Turkey and Iran are also among not free countries.
Wow.
We spoke about the, the media literacy earlier, so maybe this is...
Well, yeah, with media freedom, with internet freedom comes responsibility.
Yeah.
To be
more correct.
Well, I mean, for the journalists, when it comes to media, like traditional media, for the journalists to be more responsible about what they say and how they say it. And with social media, for people to be more responsible with what they say and how they say it and how they engage with other people. And I guess that,
What?
I was in the U.S., right? And I think I mentioned this last week. On the news, everybody was just constantly talking about Trump and Trump's impeachment. Mm-hmm. And like I said last week, nothing has really happened that I would find significant. Since last week, there's been more closed door testimony and more leaks, but then actual transcripts have been released. Again, I think it's so odd, just the way that the leaks are happening. Next week on Wednesday, they're going to start public hearings, and a lot of the people that already testified, whose transcripts have been released either in part through leaks or completely officially released, they're going to be testifying again, which makes me wonder why it was necessary for them to do it behind closed doors previously. I don't know.
Because anyway, there is this lake of information.
Yeah, but I mean, for me, the bigger news story is what's going on, not what's going on in Washington, but what's going on in the media and what's going on social media and what's going on with people. Nobody really talked about it when I was there. You didn't talk about what was going on the news with people unless you knew what side they were going to be on and you knew that you weren't going to get into an argument with them. And I think that's kind of sad. And I really, question the use of freedom on the internet,
in this sense,
in the media in the U.S. at this point. And, just kind of hey, Armenia, be careful. Look at what can happen in terms of social and political divisions if you're not responsible. So
raise your responsibility through being literate.
Yeah, and this is a great book that I read while I was in the U.S. I finished it on the plane on the way back. It's called How to Have an Impossible Conversation, a Very Practical Guide. And it's written by Peter Boghossian. He's an American.
Conversation?
Yeah, How to Have Impossible Conversations. Peter Boghossian and James Lindsay. A couple of Americans, of course. Peter is an American.
Especially.
Yeah. Boghossian. It's with a B. And here's behaviors to avoid in conversations. And I think, the media, it is a conversation, whether it's social media or whether it's the traditional media, the news stations. A list of things that you should avoid, that you shouldn't do in order to have decent conversations. Don't be discourteous or uncivil. Don't display anger. Don't raise your voice and talk over someone. Don't intentionally be disrespectful. Don't ridicule and blame someone. Don't laugh at someone. Don't attack a position before understanding it. Mm-hmm. Don't display.
That's a good one.
Yeah. Ask, and that's a lot of what this book is about. Ask them to explain and sincerely listen to what they have to say, to why they're saying what they're saying, why they think the way that they do.
Because you've never walked in their shoes.
Well, yeah. And that's one of the things that you get from reading literature. You can experience someone else's position and perspective. And here's one that I want to, don't display an unwillingness to hear your conversation partner's arguments. But here's the one that I really wanted to emphasize, because I see the media and people on social media doing this all the time. Don't adopt the least charitable interpretation of someone's words.
Oh, and don't make the advertisement wait.
I'm sorry. That's got to be, oh no. So we got to run to an advertisement. But think about that one.
Think about that one.
While you're listening to the advertisement.
We'll discuss that
Don't
one.
adopt the least charitable interpretation of someone's words.
That's a really great one. I think we should write that down in our Facebook group. Stay tuned. We'll be back shortly. This is the Great American Weekend. And
here on Radio Vaughn.
103.1. And we're talking about literature and books.
I would never live in America.
Why not? Didn't you enjoy your time there?
Yeah, why not?
It was good, but it wasn't great.
Because you didn't know us when you were there.
Join Ina MK, Master Steve, and Hasva QT for a great American experience.
Every Saturday on the Great American Weekend.
Welcome back to the Great American Weekend here on Radio Vaughn. I'm here with Ina MK.
And I'm here with Master Steve.
And we are talking about books, literature, literacy, the importance of reading.
And what was the last thing you read?
It was from this book, How to Have Impossible Conversations, a very practical guide. And I highly recommend this book. It's really, really good. And it just came out.
It sounds good.
It's just published within the last couple of months or something like that. It's not about how to win arguments. Mm-hmm. Okay, it's about to have conversations, meaningful conversations that, if they go right...
Without being rude.
Yeah, of course. And if they go right, then everybody thinks about what's going on. And everybody can kind of change their minds a little bit. So yeah, it's not about having an argument and winning an argument and getting everyone to think like you.
It's about enjoying the process.
Well, not necessarily enjoying the process, but getting something out of the process. Yeah. I mean, and not just like getting something out of the process like I'm going to get people to think like me. That's not at all what this book is about. And I really enjoyed that and appreciated it. That's great pieces of literature, great books, they get you to think. And hopefully they don't get you to think exactly like the author.
Yeah.
They get you to
not
think.
Not necessarily the same.
Yeah.
It's about maybe doubting the stuff that you just read, or arguing in your mind with the stuff that you read.
Yeah.
Making your brains move.
Yeah. Well, here, I'm going to read some prose.
Yeah.
Should we go with a classic or should we go with something more contemporary?
Let's do some classic.
Okay.
First.
So this is the beginning of Ernest Hemingway's novella, Old Man and the Sea. And you don't win a Nobel Prize for a specific work, but this was the work of his that was popular when he won the Nobel Prize. And so people often will say, well, it's his, the one that kind of pushed him over the edge to win it. And that may be true, because it is, though it is short, it's an incredibly good book. Lots of symbolism, lots of emotion, and yeah, it's a wonderful book. He was an old man who fished alone in a skiff in the Gulf Stream, and he had gone 84 days now without taking a fish. In the first 40 days, a boy had been with him, but after 40 days without a fish, the boy's parents had told him that the old man was now definitely and finally Salau, which is the worst form of unlucky. And the boy had gone at their orders in another boat, which caught 3 good fish in the first week. It made the boy sad to see the old man come in each day with his skiff empty, and he always went down to help him carry either the coiled lines or the gaff and harpoon and the sail that was furled around the mast. The sail was patched with flour sacks and furled. It looked like the flag of permanent defeat. The old man was thin and gaunt, with deep wrinkles in the back of his neck. The brown blotches of the benevolent skin cancer the sun brings from its reflection on the tropic sea were on his cheeks. The blotches ran well down the sides of his face, and his hands had the deep creased scars from handling heavy fish on the cords, but none of these scars were fresh. They were as old as erosions in a fishless desert. Everything about him was old except his eyes, and they were the same color as the sea and were cheerful and unaffected.
So beautiful. And reading and poetry and literature should definitely be interfered by
there's a great movie, Old Man and the Sea, what's his name? Anthony Quinn. We're going on another break.
Yeah, reading should not be cut by
think about that while you're thinking about buying whatever our advertisers are trying to sell you.
Stay tuned. We'll be back after the break, and also a song, Girl in the Moon, Patrick Noah. This is the Great American Weekend. We're here till 9 p.m. with Master Steve, and I'm Ina MK.
Hello?
Hi, is your refrigerator running?
No, it doesn't have any legs.
Some American jokes just don't work with foreigners.
Welcome back to the Great American Weekend here on Radio Vaughn. I'm here with Ina MK, and it's
time. It's the right time for some education here.
All right.
Master Steve?
Well, I've got some, and I mean, not really slang, but it's literary terminology and terms. One of them that I love, useful. That is incredibly useful today, I think, and it's something that we need to keep in mind, is hyperbole. Hyperbole is exaggerated statements or claims not meant to be taken literally. Mm-hmm. So you exaggerate in order to make a point, and you don't expect your audience to think that what you're saying is actually literally true. And I think, there are a lot of people in Washington that use a lot of hyperbole. This is the greatest. This is the worst. This is the most horrible. This is the
great American hyperbole.
Yes. The Great American Weekend. Ooh. Let's see. I want to talk a little bit about narration. Okay, so the person who's telling a story. You can have first-person narration, which is me telling my story. So, I walked into the room.
First face.
And
First.
Yeah. And then there's third person. So you say, he did this, she did that. It's a person that's, sometimes it's a person that's in the story, but they're talking about what everyone else is doing. But most of the time it's somebody that's outside of the story that's talking about what is going on. And then when you have a third person, you can have...
The cameraman.
Yeah, exactly. You can have the omniscient third person narrator, which is the all-knowing. Omniscient means all-knowing. So they know everything. They know what everyone is thinking.
Omni means everything.
Yep.
Yeah.
They know what everybody's thinking. They know maybe even what's going to happen in the end. There's that. And then there's limited omniscience, where you know a lot of things more than a normal person would know, but you don't know everything.
Omniscient lights.
Yeah.
Light version.
Poetry, some poetry terms. Well, general literature terms, but you find these things most often in poetry. Alliteration. It would be the repetition of the same sound at the beginning of a word.
Sound?
So it's kind of like the opposite of a rhyme. Rhymes are when the ends of words make the same sound. Alliteration is when the beginning of the word makes the same sound. So from William Faulkner's Nobel Prize acceptance speech, his Nobel lecture, he has this line, "The last ding dong of doom." D, D, D. The last ding dong of doom.
That does sound like a ding dong song.
Sounds so depressing and dark. To carry on with the alliteration. Internal rhyme is rhyme that's in the middle of a line and not at the end of a line. So if, say, the word in the middle of a line of poetry, it rhymes with the word at the end or with the word in the middle of the line below it. That would be internal rhyme, because we're used to having the rhymes being at the end of the lines.
Yeah, we're used to that.
So that's regular rhyme, and then internal rhyme is when it's inside of the line. There's free verse poetry, which means that the poetry has no meter, so no set number of syllables in each line.
Called
and
in Russian, white poem.
Well, hold on though, because free verse means that there's no meter and there's no rhyme. Okay, and then in English you also have blank verse, which means there's meter, but there's no rhyme. So the lines have a set number of syllables, but they don't rhyme at the end, or they don't rhyme regularly. There may be some what sometimes it's called.
Something.
Well, no. If there's a pattern to it, then it's a rhyme scheme. The pattern of rhyming is a rhyme scheme. Sometimes you just have accidental rhyme.
Accidental.
Yeah, where there's no pattern to it. And of course, there are all sorts of different complex patterns that you can have to rhyme. There are rhyming couplets where it's A, so two lines rhyme with one another, and then the next two lines rhyme, and then the next two lines rhyme.
That often happens with lyrics.
Yes. And that's actually in Dante's Divine Comedy. Rhyming couplets. Or there's alternating rhyme. So line 1 lines with line 3, and line 2 rhymes with line 4. Or maybe it's just 2 and 4 and not 1 and 3. Right? Let's see. Then what else? Allusion is a passing or casual reference to something. You say something and you mean more by it than what you're just saying. You're referencing something, but just in passing. And that's, in order to really start to understand poetry, you have to read more poetry, because a lot of times poets are making allusions to other poems and to other poets, and the more
that happens often.
The more of it you read, the more of it you start to
understand their inner world of poetry.
Exposition, and this is more about prose and short stories and novels. Exposition is where you're setting the scene. You're starting out and you're talking about the time, the place that the story is going to take place. You've got dynamic characters, which is a character that changes as the story goes along. So things happen to them in the story, and they change or grow or whatever because of it, as opposed to static characters who stay the same. Main characters are usually dynamic. Secondary characters are usually are a lot of times static, and so you've got and there's one phrase that I like, that somebody is simply a function of the plot.
Function of the plot.
Yeah, meaning they're not really there to be taken seriously as a character, or there's an event that isn't really there to be taken seriously as something that might actually happen, or that is maybe not realistic. Like a character who just shows up and does something and then disappears is not like a real person.
He has a special mission.
They're just one-dimensional. Mm-hmm. They're simply there.
A little episode.
To do something to move the plot along. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're a function of the plot. They're not a real person. So you've got three-dimensional characters that... character that's complex enough to be considered or thought of as a real person. The climax is the high point of a story where, you've got rising tension, where the conflict between characters or whatever increases, and then the climax is where explodes or gets resolved. And then after that, you have the resolution and the falling action. If you talk about the classical plot curve of a story.
We're in the climax of...
and we have to go. We have to go and listen to some music. No, we have to go and listen to some music because I hate music. Jeez, no, we get to go and listen to some music.
This time we're happy. It's Feel It Still, Portugal, The Man. We'll be back after the music break, and we'll continue with the terms. Stay tuned.
And I've got some more stuff I want to read, too. Okay. Some more literature.
Let's go.
Hey, Steve, do you like hash, harissa, and spas?
Yeah, I love them. But what would you call them in English?
Yeah, I'd call them cowfoot stew, chicken porridge, and sour yogurt soup.
Sorry I asked.
The Great American Weekend.
Yeah, we definitely love hash. Well, I do.
When you call it hash, I can deal with that. Especially the garlic. I love garlic. You put that much garlic in almost anything, and it's got to be good. I know there are a lot of people out there that'll disagree with me, but so what?
I love garlic. Not the smell, of course. Now let's get back to our theme, and I've prepared, as always, a special little quiz.
You got a quiz.
This one is a really short one and quick one because I know that you can't wait to read some more stuff. So let's do it really fast.
Some contemporary stuff, some stuff by people who are still alive.
So there's a time limit, so let's do it really fast. Reading was once considered a form of physical exercise. Fact or fiction?
Fiction.
Fact.
What?
Yeah.
Next
question.
Okay.
Stories did not exist before writing. Fact, fiction?
Fiction.
Of course. True. Next question. Only English language writers have produced notable works of science fiction. Fact, fiction.
Wait, what was it?
Only English language writers have produced notable works
of
science.
No, that's not true. That's fiction.
True. Right. Aesop, the storyteller, was a real person.
No, he wasn't.
Right. The Vikings were illiterate.
No, they wait. I mean, I don't.
15.
I'm going to say yes. I'm going to say that they did have a written language.
Okay, so it's the fiction.
Yeah, fiction. I'm wrong, aren't I?
No, you're not.
No, I'm not. Oh, okay.
The body of stories Scheherazade told is called Don Quixote.
Then, 1,001 Arabian Nights or 1,000 Arabian Nights.
10 seconds.
Aladdin and what? No, that's false.
Right. The next question. Many European books are printed in Asia. True or false?
Now, probably true. It's cheaper.
You're right.
It's cheaper.
And perhaps the most important philosopher in Chinese culture is Confucius.
Okay, yeah, I can go with that.
You're right. 2 more questions. Most people were illiterate in ancient times.
True.
Literate?
Oh, illiterate. We're illiterate. I mean, literacy is something that is quite new.
And he's right. And the last question. The Cinderella story is quite unique to Italian folklore.
No, that's not true. It was actually, I think, first written down by Charles Perrault.
And he got 9 out of 10.
Oh, which one did I get wrong? Which one did I get wrong?
The one about
the Vikings?
The very first one.
Oh, the very first. What was the very first one?
The very first question was about reading was once considered.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Oh, I forgot. I conveniently forgot that I got one wrong. How can that be exercise?
I don't know.
Jeez,
that's
man.
funny.
That's funny.
You see, you are so smart, but you learned something from this test, from this quiz. So it was useful.
Well, you got to learn something every day, don't you?
Yeah.
So I'm going to read something from The Mystery of Tony the Goat and Other Tales by Jim Studer, who is one of the people that taught me all of those literary terms and stuff that I was talking about before the break. This is from a story called
Master
So
Steve's
Much
Master.
to Pray For, definitely. And it's a story set in central Minnesota during the Prohibition. So it's talking about shine, which is moonshine, and it's talking about the G-men, which are the guys who are supposed to go around and catch all the people bootlegging, making illegal alcohol.
Exciting.
Wilson County was almost all Catholic, but the Germans, Polish, and Irish disliked each other so much that many of the small towns had 2 Catholic churches. At one end was a German church, while at the other end was a Polish or Irish church. The Italians, French, and Spanish were not represented well, if at all, in Wilson County. The few Scandinavian Lutherans were tolerated as long as their relatives stayed out of the county. You said everybody in Crossing hated Hunts. Then how come no one turned him into the feds about his stills? The feds offered rewards. Hildegard, now perched on a big rock further downriver, waited until the frustrated and winded sheriff caught up. He explained that everyone was afraid of the man. Everyone was afraid of Hunts. He was short, only 5 feet 8 inches, but his shoulders were as wide as a keg, and his fists looked like the hams of his hogs. Many owed him money and were too afraid he would take their farms. Others feared if they squealed on him, he would squeal on them. Making money on the shine was better than getting Hunts. Evidently, some still got word to the G-men, but when they went to search his pig barns, the stink from the pig shit was so bad they gave it up. The stink covered up the sweet smell of cooking the shine. Hunts never cleaned any of it up from that end of his pig run for over 20 years. Hunts knew when the feds were coming and which pig barn they had a warrant to search. When they tore his pig barn to pieces, they only found enough pig shit to fertilize 20 acres. Flattery asked how Goring knew that the feds were coming. Oh, some of the feds are like you and the county attorney. They like money more than they like doing the job, he laughed as he said it. So you've got the police that are supposed to be enforcing prohibition and going out and getting these stills and stuff. You've got them telling the guys who are running the stills, we're coming to bust you. You better hide everything. And he was able to hide it so well because he had just let all the pig poop pile up around, and you could never smell the alcohol. It's wonderful.
That was smart. Kids definitely shouldn't read this book.
How to Get Away with Things.
Yeah.
How to Get Away with Things. I've got another poem here, and this is by Philip Nikolaev, and he is a Russian-American poet. He, I guess he was born and grew up in Moscow and then has been living in Massachusetts since 91, I believe. He was studying at Harvard University in 91 when the Soviet Union fell apart. Mm-hmm. It's called Hope.
Hope. We talked about hope
Yeah.
a lot earlier.
In this incalculable age of trolling ideologies, as we survey the global stage, we can't expect apologies. Behold, my friend, what we have wrought, the heat we have brought, the wars we've fought, and soon all this may come to naught, and yet we hope not, and yet we hope not.
Beautiful. and yet this might come to naught. N-O-T.
Yeah. N-O-T. Yeah.
Bravo. Thank you. I've got applause for my Master Steve here. Before we go for a little break, and right after that...
We have to do our calendar of events. And I'd wanted to read from Ben Mazur's selected poems. And these two guys are just people that I found on Facebook that
Really?
write poetry. Yeah, and they're published poets from New England. Ben Mazur and Philip Nikolaev. Good stuff.
Thanks
good
for
contemporary
sharing some
stuff.
good stuff with us. And always learn stuff from you, Master Steve.
We've got the commercial break, and then we're back with our calendar of events, right?
Right.
Here on the Great American Weekend, Radio Von.
103.1.
Hello and welcome to the Great American Weekend. Today...
Steve, who is that?
I think we've been infiltrated by a Russian radio host.
Learn about American politics on the Great American Weekend.
Welcome back to Radio Von and the Great American Weekend. We are here with the calendar of events for the upcoming
we really
week.
enjoyed this show and each other and the conversation because it was so full of art of literacy and literature. Ooh.
Movies in English at Keynote Park from November 9th to November 13th. We've got The Addams Family Again, which is a new American 3D computer animated comedy / horror film based on the old Addams Family comics. That's at 2:10 p.m. every day. We've got Terminator Dark Fate, and that as well as a new American movie, a science fiction action film that is at 4:05 p.m. every day. The Joker at 4:20. We've talked about that movie before. We've got another one, Dr. Sleep.
That's a new one.
Yeah, and that's a new American horror film based on the 2013 novel of the same name by Stephen King, the master of horror writing.
Yep. And which is a sequel to King's.
Oh yeah,
Shining.
it's a sequel to The Shining. I should see this movie because The Shining, the movie, was absolutely incredible.
Yeah,
but come on, that was Kubrick. But okay, we'll see how
Jack
this
Nicholson.
is. Yes,
And
all work and no play make Jack a dull boy.
We've got Opera and Ballet Theater premiere Crystal Palace Ballet in 2 acts November 12th at 7 p.m. We've got Anush Opera in 3 acts November 14th at 7 p.m. And again, the premiere Crystal Palace Ballet in 2 acts November 16th at 7 p.m. Live music comes next. Haik Shakaryan Trio at Ulihanyan Club November 9th starting now.
So if you're sitting at home listening to the show, or if you're driving around in your car and you don't know what to do, get over to Ulihanyan and catch this show. The 5th season band Gate of Frequencies is playing at the Green Dragon Club Distillery on November 10th, so that's tomorrow night at 9 p.m. Personal Opinion, David Melkoyan's group at Ulihanyan on the 10th of November as well. The Reincarnation Orchestra is playing at the New Jans Music Hall on November 10th. We've got Rafael Petrosian's quartet at Ulihanyan on November 11th. The Nagash Ensemble, John Hudian is back in town, and he'll be leading the Nagash Ensemble on November 12th at 7 p.m. at the Komitas Museum Institute. Garik and Sona are at Club 12 on November 13th at 9:30. Autumn Jazz Move with Karina Arustamian and the band. They are at Kami Club on November 14th. We've got Aram MP3 at Mezzo on November 14th at 8 p.m. Surbuk with a live band is at the Vahagni Restaurant on November 15th at 8 p.m. Sirusho at Divin Music Hall on November 15th. A musical evening dedicated to Robert Amir Kanyan's 80th birthday at the Kvesian Center for the Arts on November 16th at 8 p.m. Arsen Nersisian's quartet is at Ulihanyan Club on November 16th. And Iveta Makurchian is live at Jan's Music Hall on November 16th as well.
Thank you. And we also have Flamenco Night with Los Locos at the venue, November 17th at 9:30 p.m. And Dialogue Project at Ulihanyan, November 19th at 8:30 p.m. And now let's see what other events we have. The venue pub quiz. Gather your smartest friends and put your pub quiz dream team to the test. Quiz questions will be in English, but we will translate to Armenian and Russian if needed, says the Facebook page.
Yeah, I love pub quizzes. They used to have it at Irish 26 all the time, and I would go.
Yeah,
it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun.
So this event is November 14th at 9 p.m. Make sure you reserve the table beforehand. Mom and Kid Expo 2019, November 16th through 17th from 11 a.m. at Mergeleon Cluster. Lingo Star English for Kids at Loft, November 10 at 3 p.m. KIN Film Festival 2019. Opening ceremony will be held on November 11th at 7 p.m. at AGBU Armenia Hall. Arm Comedy Organic Eco Stand-Up.
Eco Stand-Up? It's sustainable?
November 16th at 7:30.
No GMOs, no pesticides.
Yeah. 7:30 p.m. at Sundukan Theater. And Arm Cocktail Festival, November 16th at 6:30 p.m. at Divin Music Hall. They have DJs, live music, and some contests, prizes, etc. And that's all we have for this upcoming week. This was our episode on books, literature, literacy in general. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope you enjoyed us reading poetry and some other stuff from
Hopefully we didn't bore you
books.
to death. But, yeah.
And we're done. Read good books.
Well, I'm not done. I'm going to sit here and just keep reading.
Okay.
But I guess it's time to turn off
If you guys want to
our
see
microphones.
Master Steve reading, just come to Radio Vaughn station and see it
Just
live.
stop on by.
Just stop by. Have a great day. Have a great rest of the weekend. And see you guys next Saturday.
Week on the Great American Weekend here at Radio Vaughn.
Bye-bye.